Peace, this is your host, Selah, Shalom. And the topic of discussion today is called Incarnation and Re-incarnation, knowing the difference. Now, what is incarnation? It's rooted in the Latin word incarno, meaning to make into flesh or to be made flesh. That is the meaning of the word without religious belief. Now, this is different from reincarnation, which means the rebirth of a soul in a new body, or a person or an animal in whom a particular soul is believed to have been reborn. Now, this form of reincarnation is really engrafting. Engrafting meaning the spirits of the dead can attach themselves to a living person and can have influence over that person, whether they know it or not. Reincarnation was taught by angels of the first resurrection, engrafted on mortals, inspiring them that they once lived in the past, with no substantial proof other than the spirit saying it. And sometimes the spirit will express the time period they lived in, maybe 100 years previous. And once researched, many have confirmed to be true events. This is the nature of reincarnated teachings. And in the Oahspe, it speaks on reincarnation as taught by angels of the first resurrection who have not learned to leave the earth plane, as stated in the book of Judgment, chapter 3, verse 11 through 13, verse 11. But of such as are below grade 1, there are more than 6,000 millions, which comprise such angels as knowing nothing more than babes, though for the most part they were full-grown adults as to earth life. See that? Some are fetals, some are engrafters, professional reincarnators, who dwell with one mortal during his lifetime and then engraft themselves on another mortal during his lifetime, and so on, calling themselves reincarnated, and in fact, knowing no other heavens, being disbelievers in the all-person and in my exalted kingdoms. See that? Verse 12. Such as are below grade 1, I have classified this day as drudges, because they have not left the earth and entered the first resurrection. Verse 13. They inhabit mostly the oldest cities and places of filth and indecency. Nevertheless, they also inhabit the palaces of kings and queens, and emperors and popes, and priests, and rich men. See that? So here it lays out the nature of reincarnated spirits, which are not reincarnated in fact, but spirits of the dead that engraft themselves on the living. See that? Now, we're going to explain the nature of incarnation, showing you the difference. Now, incarnation is when those who have died can appear to the living. In the Oahspe, this is called sargos, where angels have the ability to appear before mortals. That is incarnation. Once a person dies, depending on the strength of the will of that person's spirit, they can appear as incarnated to the living. And an example of this is in the book of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 16, where it states, And now was the earth in the latter days of Simu, and the angels could readily take on corporeal bodies for themselves. Out of the elements of the earth clothe they themselves, by force of their wills, with flesh and bones. By the side of the Asuans took on corporeal forms. Asuans mean primitive man. So here it gives you a description of incarnation. It states that the angels clothe they themselves by the force of their wills with flesh and bones. So it's showing you that one can harness the willpower to clothe themselves using the elements of the earth to create a corporeal body. So when you read in the Bible and it speaks of angels appearing to mortals, It will be by willpower of the angels that they were able to do these things. Another example in the book of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 14. It states, verse 14, "There are lightened upon a new earth millions of angels from heaven, but many of them had never fulfilled the corporeal life, having died in infancy. And these angels comprehended not procreation, nor corporeal life." So here it states how the angels alightened or appeared on earth. This appearance was done by the power of their own will. So incarnation is when the angel appears to mortals, not coming through the womb or engrafting themselves on another body. That falls in reincarnation. But incarnation is when the very person who once died appears in spirit, not engrafting on no one, but the very person themselves. Another example of incarnation is with Zarathustra, when he incarnated himself after his death, as stated in the book of God's Word, chapter 29, verse 21 and 22. It states, verse 21, "While Asha was thus speaking, behold, the soul of Zarathustra came and stood before them, and he was arrayed in the semblance of his own flesh and color, and in his own clothes. And he spoke, saying, Fear not, I am the same that was with you, and was hanged and died, whose flesh was devoured by the lions. I am Zarathustra. Marvel not that I have the semblance of a corporeal body, for its substance is holden together by the power of my spirit. Neither is this a miracle, for the spirits of all the living hold in the same manner, each in its own corporeal body. As iron attracts iron, the spirit learneth to attract from the air a corporeal body of its like in measure." So here again we see the same manifestation of willpower. Angels can use atomic particles, which are the elements of the earth, being minerals, to manifest themselves after death. This is the same concept with Jesus' resurrection after death, being seen by many after his death. Now, verse 22. "Then inquired one who was present, Where are the two thieves? To which Zarathustra said, As stream rises from boiling water without shape or form, so are their souls this hour. For this reason I was sent into the world by the Father. Let him who would become controller of his own spirit unto everlasting life learn the Oahspe law, which is the Jehovian law, the Creator's law, seeking to grow in spirit instead of living for the things of this world." So here Zarathustra is given an example that if you follow the Creator's law and abide by his will, that you would have the ability to do these things after death by the power of your own will, showing yourself to the living after your physical death. Another example of incarnation after death is with the story of the prophet Chini. Now in the book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 30, verse 10 through 14, it states, verse 10, "So Chini died and was burnt to ashes on the 6th day under the superintendence of King TZ, and the ashes were scattered in the fields as commanded." Verse 11, "And on the 7th day, while the multitude surrounded all the place, a whirlwind," which is a vortex, "came and gathered up the ashes in a small degree, and the ashes were illumined or illuminated, and the soul of Chini went therein, and he burst the whirlwind or the vortex and came down even at the king's feet." So again, we see the same example of willpower by gathering up the elements of the earth, atomic particles, gases, and notice it even referenced a whirlwind, which is vortexian power, the root of all creation. Even your DNA flows in a vortexian current. So willpower is the manipulation of vortexian current by the angels in charge. That's the science of it. So it's not make-believe. This is not something that cannot be explained, just to be clear. Verse 12, "And Chini said, Knowest thou who I am? And the king answered, saying, Of a truth thou art Chinese. And because this hath come to pass, I decree that this, thy native land, shall henceforth forever be called China. And I will send unto other kings also, and they will decree the same thing. So here the name of China stems from the prophet Chinese. Verse 13. Chinese said, Even so do thou. And since the Father hath allowed me 7 days to remain with his chosen, and with thee, O king, apprise thou whom I will name to thee, to come and see me. And thereupon Chinese told the king whom desired to come. Verse 14. And Chinese walked about on the earth, even the same as before death. Nor could any man tell by looking at him that he had passed through death. Nor was his clothes different, although they were made out of the ashes in the whirlwind. See that? See what's going on here? This was the same case with Jesus after death, or Yeshua. He was seen by many who testified of a truth that he had resurrected. The only difference is that he didn't resurrect in his physical body. But as described, he used the elements of the earth, which are the minerals, atomic particles, by the power of his will, and gathered them, clothed his spirit with corporeal substance and resemblance of a physical body. This is incarnation. That's what Yeshua did. That's what Chinese did. That's what Zarathustra did, all after death, to prove to us the power of will through the obedience of the Creator. Understand this. These are the possibilities granted to everyone who is in obedience to the will of the Creator. Now, another example of incarnation of the Spirit is in the book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 26, verse 27 through 42. It states, verse 27, And the king said, Here is chalk. Mark thou on the floor the character which is on the top of my tablet. On the left of the throne, thereupon the magician marked correctly. And now again the king tried him as to his power to see without his eyes, and in far off places. And having proven him in many ways, the king said, Can thou also show the spirits of the dead? Verse 28. Lu Sin said, Of a truth I can, O king, but that requires me to enter the sublime state of creation, which is even yet more expensive. Verse 29. The king said, Have I not said I will pay thee? Go to then, enter the sublime state of creation at once. Now, here's where the magician incarnate his spirit while still alive. Remember, it's the willpower, how these things are able to be done. Verse 30. Lu Sin then went into a dark corner and laid himself down on the floor, and then swallowed his tongue, and was motionless and stiff, like one that is quite dead. Presently, a light like a thin smoke rose up from the body, and stood a little aside, and a voice spoke out of the light, saying. So here the magician was able to make manifest his own spirit outside of his body as a light thin cloud of smoke at this particular moment. Now, these were the things taught in the mystery schools. Verse 31. He said, A voice spoke out of the light, saying, verse 31, Who art thou that calls upon the spirits of the dead? Beware, he whose body lieth stiff and cold beside me is one of the heirs of the immortal gods. What would thou, man of earth? Verse 32. The king said, Who art thou? The voice answered, I am Jos, Tien, ruler of heaven and earth, the great spirit, personified, creator of all. So here the spirit is testing the king. Verse 33. The king in satire said, Thou art welcome, O Tien. I am one of the most blessed of mortals, because thou hast made my place a holy place. Verse 34. The spirit then assumed mortal shape and stood before the king, even while the magician's body laid on the floor in sight also. The spirit said, What question is it troubleth thee, O king? Speak thou, and I will answer thee, for I am all wisdom and truth personified. So here again, the Spirit is testing the king. Verse 35. The king said, Why hast thou not appeared to me before this? Why have I been left in dark as to thy real existence? Answer thou me this, for it is the real foundation on which I desire to rest many questions. Verse 36. The Spirit said, My son, TZ, I have been with thee from thy youth up, watching over thee. For thou shalt become the greatest king of all in the world. Yea, there are great works for thee to do. And if thou desires to extend the kingdom, or to gain great battles, will show thee the way. Or if thou desires another woman to wife, I will find her for thee. Verse 38. The Spirit said, Who says thou I am? The king replied, I am lost to know if thou art a fool or a devil. And I say that I have either seen one like thee, or else thee, through many magicians. But Alice, there all knowledge endeth. Verse 39. The Spirit said, Thou saidst thou would pay thee the fates decreed. Hear me then, O king. Thou shalt give to Lu Sing 4 pieces of gold, and after that I will explain all things to thee. Verse 40. The king then cast the 4 pieces of gold to Lu Sing, and demanded the knowledge as promised. The Spirit then said, And on thy oath thou wilt not reveal. Verse 41. The king said, I solemnly swear to reveal not of what thou teachest me. The Spirit said, Know then, O king, I am Lu Sin, the magician. By long training, the magician attained to go out of his own body in spirit, and to appear in any form or shape desired. Wilt thou try me? The king said, Show me the spirit of Hagusi. So here, let me interrupt for a minute. So here again, we see that the magicians were able to make their spirit come out of their physical body and be seen by many. And like it said, can assume shape of any person desired. And this also goes to show you how deceiving angels can be, because Lu Sang, the magician, was leading on the king. He was basically deceiving the king, and the king was believing it. So if it wasn't for him saying, Yo, it's me, Lu Sang, the magician, I just told you I was God and you believed it, type of thing, you know what I mean? So it shows you how easily mortals can be deceived by magicians, seers, and prophets who have the ability to do these things, let alone the angels deceiving mortals already. Now, verse 42. The Spirit walked back to the body of Lu Sin, and presently returned before the king, looking like the spirit of Hagusi. The king said, It is like the king. The Spirit answered, Here then, O man, is the end of philosophy. Behold, I am Lu Sin also. Some men are one spirit, some 2, some 3, and some 4 to one corporeal body, and yet there is but one person in fact. See that? This is the reality and nature of spirits. Many of them can occupy one body. And as a preset to add to this, in the book of Fragapati, Son of Jehovah, chapter 35, verse 7, it states, With and around about the people of Japheth, there are more than 2,000 million angels who know not how to get away from the earth. Of these, millions of them are fetals, making themselves as twined spirits to mortals. These spirits often show themselves to mortals, but are believed to be doubles. But the spirits thus bound know not themselves who they are or whence they came. Neither can they go away from the mortal to whom they are bound and on whom they live. See that? So this confirms that spirits of the dead can engraft on the living. This coincides with reincarnated spirits, which are really engrafted spirits on mortals. Another example, another preset to add on top of this, in the book of Wars Against Jehovah, chapter 51, verse 10 through 13, it states, verse 10, But woe came unto them. The land became flooded with hundreds of millions of drudges, spirits of darkness. And as to the people of Egypt, the chief desire was to be able to return in spirit after death and dwell with mortals. and the things which followeth are not even lawful to mention. See that? Verse 11. Suffice it, these spirits lost all sight of any higher heavens than to dwell on the earth. So meaning right there that these angels lost sight of graduating from Etheria. And if the focus is not Etheria, then you're basically going to stagnate backwards. And they stagnated back to earth. Not even to say we're going to remain in the first resurrection or the second resurrection. They stagnated back to the earth. So as the verse states again, these spirits lost all sight of any higher heavens, but then to dwell on earth. They knew no other. And they watched about when children were born, and obsessed them, driving hence the natural spirit, and growing up in the new body of the newborn, calling themselves reincarnated. And these drudges, spirits of darkness, professed that when they previously lived on earth, they were great kings or queens or philosophers. See that? So the doctrine of reincarnation stems out of Egypt as well. So when you're not progressing through the first, second, and third, and then into the Etherian realms, when you're not progressing in that manner, you're going to stagnate backwards. Verse 12. And they taught as their master Osiris the false did, that there was no higher heaven than here on the earth. This is something that the Hebrew Israelites teach as well, because they believe that the New Jerusalem is going to come down from heaven to earth, and that the establishment is going to be on earth, not knowing that that's not the way it works. The way it works is you graduate off earth through your physical death and then progress through the first, second, and third resurrection after death, and then into the Etherian realms. That's the graduation. But again, these false gods got you believing in other doctrines that's going to keep you bound to the lower heavens and earth. So again, it states, and they taught as their master Osiris the false did, that there was no higher heaven than here on the earth, and that man must be reincarnated over and over until the flesh become immortal. Not all of these spirits drove hence the natural spirit, but many merely engrafted themselves on the same body. And while such persons lived, these spirits lived with them, and dwelt with them day and night, not knowing more than their mortal companion. And when such person died, behold, the Druja, spirit of darkness, went and engrafted itself on another child, and lived and dwelt with it in the same way, and thus continuing generation after generation. See that? These are the struggles of the spirits that do not seek resurrection, but seek to linger in the earth, seeking to regain an earthly body, seeking to deceive mortals that they once lived again, not knowing that this is a spirit attached to you, inspiring you to believe this. Verse 13. And because of these indulgence, many of the spirits came in Sargos. Sargos meaning the ability to appear. They incarnated in the families of the Egyptians, eating and drinking with them corporally, yea, and even doing things whereof no man may speak, whereby dire disease seized upon the flesh of mortals, and their blood and their flesh became inhabited with vermin. The people became idlers and vagrants. The land were not tilled, and the place of learning became deserted, ruins. So here these spirits incarnated themselves, eating and drinking, doing things unlawful. So this is to show you the depths of what's going on in times past and in present, with mortals and angels dealing with incarnation and reincarnation, understanding the difference. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings, and catch you on the next documentary. Shalom.